This month we look at trust, courage, and how doing the right thing builds employee empowerment and customer lifetime value. Let's do this. Hi there, my name is Ken Hughes. Welcome back to another episode. Today I'm going to address what I'm asked all the time about return on investment on customer and employee experience. In fact, I wrote an article a couple of months ago on the desire to invest. The link is here if you want to look at that. The difference between ROI and just having a strong desire to invest in customer experience, customer connection, and employee empowerment. But I want to talk today mainly around trust, courage, and how doing the right thing really embeds that strong employee empowerment and customer lifetime value that we of course all seek as brands. I'm going to use a couple of stories. The first story I want to tell you is a company called HomeServe. They are an insurance company. You buy a subscription as a customer, and basically anything that goes wrong in your house from a heating or ventilation or air conditioning or plumbing perspective, they just call around and fix it. So you pay an annual fee and then you have access to an engineer or plumber whenever you need it. And this is a story around Mark Harrison turning up one day to a bungalow, a house that he had been to before. A customer, she was age 90, he knew she was housebound, and he rang the doorbell and there was no answer. He thought that was unusual because she would usually be at home, so he called into the HQ call center to see had the appointment been reconfirmed, and yes, it had. She had already confirmed that morning that she would be there, and so he thought that was very unusual that she had already reconfirmed the appointment. There was no answer from her door, so he went around the back of the house to look in the window, and there she was lying unresponsive on the floor of her kitchen. Of course, immediately he ran to his van, got a wrench, came back, smashed the window, broke his way into the home, and he found her unconscious, and he immediately started CPR. Mike was a lifeguard, and so he had those skills, called the ambulance, of course, and in the time the ambulance took to get there, he maintained CPR, and later he was to discover that the CPR he had administered saved that customer's life. In fact, beautifully, he sent her flowers later on that day. While she was away in the ambulance in the hospital, he fixed her toilet, which was why he had been called out in the first place, and he repaired the window that he had broken on his way in. And so it's a wonderful story of customer connection. But what happened next was really interesting. He's back at site, and all his colleagues, of course, are talking to him about, wow, my God, that's amazing, you're so good. And he, of course, just said, well, look, I did what any good neighbor would do. But they all shook their heads and they thought, well, that's fine, but you have CPR training, you're a lifeguard, you knew what to do, we wouldn't have done. And then he started thinking about that, and so he went to management. And he started talking to management about the skills that he had brought to bear that day. And wouldn't it be nice if all of their engineers, the 1,900 engineers on the road, had those skills also? And so Greg Reed, the CEO, thought, yeah, there's probably something in that. And he brought it to the board. And the board, of course, shot it down. They said, hang on, it's going to cost like $500,000 to train all of our engineers on CPR. We're not a healthcare company. It's not our priority. In fact, you could argue that we're in fact even going into a grey legal area. If we do something and it goes wrong, we're open for litigation. And so, it's not our product. We're a plumbing company. We're ventilation. But Greg played the CEO veto card, and he said, no, I believe this is the right thing to do. We have many of us on the road every day, and we're often maybe sometimes accidental first responders, and so we should have these skills. And so he just stood his ground. He got that $500,000 investment. They trained all of their engineers in CPR. And interestingly, about a year later, 6 months, a year later, one of their engineers was at home and he got a knock on his door, a neighbor banging on the glass. Her husband had just dropped to the floor next door, and she came in for help. He ran in again to find the husband unresponsive and saved his life. So that engineer, again, without that CPR training that he had received at work, wouldn't have saved that man's life. And so the consequences are significant of doing the right thing. So from an employee empowerment perspective, sometimes doing the right thing clashes with this fascination that we have in corporate for ROI, for financial return, for revenue, for profit. And we actually drift away from doing the right thing from here, from an empathetic point of view, from a compassionate point of view. And so often as a leader, if you ever come across the moment where doing the right thing clashes with kind of the commercial interests of the company, I think it's important to lead from the heart and not from the brain at certain times. And that's certainly true of employee empowerment. Another story I want to tell you is a story all around trust. I was in Sydney performing at an event. I was flying home the next day. I had a little bit of time after my performance. And so typically as an Irishman, I set off into the sunshine. We rarely see it. I went to Bondi Beach, and there's a little walk from Bondi Beach around to the next cove. It takes about an hour along the water. So I set off, happy days, sunshine. And of course, typically being unused to the sun, I didn't take any water bottle with me. And so by the time I arrived an hour later, I was practically crawling like a desert man in an oasis. And so there was a little cafe called Jenny's Cafe, smoothies, juices. So I went in, ordered myself a bespoke juice, none of that kale rubbish, no. And so she made me a beautiful juice, and I was literally drinking it as I was taking out my credit card to pay. And she pointed to a sign that said, sorry, no cards, cash only. And this was before COVID, it was kind of 2018, 2019. And I thought, sorry, I don't have any cash. And so she pointed me to an ATM up the road. So I went off to the ATM, and the ATM was out of order. And so I came back to her, thought, well, I'm sorry, I don't have any cash. The ATM is out of order. And she started laughing and thinking, well, don't worry about it. Pay me next time you're passing. And I then thought, well, that's fine, but I live in Ireland. It'll be quite some time before I'm passing. I'm flying home tomorrow. And so she just pushed the juice. I had the juice already in my hand. She said, look, take the juice. It's okay, on the house. Pay me next time you're back in Australia, as a joke. And so I thanked her, of course. That was very sweet of her. And I went off about my day. About 3 or 4 years later, I was back in Sydney for another performance. And of course, I made it my business to go out of my way to visit her cafe and pay her for the juice. She didn't remember who I was, which I was devastated. It was a story that I had carried in my head. And so I paid her for the juice that I had got 5 years previously. I ordered another juice while I was there, and she was so touched by the fact that I'd come back to pay for this juice 5 years later that she gave me the next juice on the house. And now we're stuck in this weird cycle, because every time I go back to Sydney, I do make it a little quirky ritual I have of visiting Jenny's Cafe and paying her for the juice that she gave me the last time. I think we're in our third iteration of this now. But what's really interesting is the loyalty that I have now to this little mom and pop cafe was built based on trust. It was built based on generosity. And so these things like empathy, compassion, generosity, trust, they're all things that lay down customer lifetime value for us. They're connections that we form with our customers or with our employees. And so without trust and without loyalty and without some kind of emotional investment, there is no relationship, really, is there? And I'm fascinated in the corporate world by how little sometimes we show our customers we care. Here's a really classic example. Let's say you go on to buy a new cell phone or a new broadband deal, and you're usually kind of given 3 or 4 options, aren't you? Like, in terms of data, you can have this amount of gigabytes or this amount of gigabytes, this amount of terabytes. And so none of us really understand how many, unless you're a business, like, how do I know how much data I'm using on an average week or month? I have no idea. And so we all kind of do the Goldilocks thing, and we pick the middle one. We think, well, not too small, not too big, I'll do this one. And then you sign up for a 12-month contract. Now, imagine a world where after 3 months of that contract, your provider would send you an email or ring you and say, look, we noticed, Ken, that you're not using the amount of data you thought you were, and you're actually on a higher package and you're paying for that data, but you're not using it. So how about we bump you down to the lower value package because that suits your needs better? Now, that's a call no one's ever get. You get the other one, you get the upsell, you get we want to sell you more stuff, we want to make more money out of you, but you never get the, look, we have you, we've got you, we're going to support you, we realize that you're on the wrong package, so we're going to downsell you. If they did that, that would be they would lose revenue, of course, that day, but in the long term, they would have me for a customer for life. And so sometimes I think we have to really look at this hunger for profit and revenue and growth that we have in our businesses at our core KPI. It does clash sometimes with our ability to build relationship with our clients. And ultimately, relationship is about, 2 people giving. And so we get the money and the business from the customer, but do we give them enough? Do we give them enough support? Do we give them enough love? Do we show them enough empathy? Do we have trust, loyalty, and courage at the core of what we do? And sometimes doing what's right should trump profit and revenue. Until next time, I'm Ken Hughes.